Oh, hello everybody! Dr. Kashey's here, and I have decided, or maybe I haven't decided, that I wanted to make a video, or like a time-restricted video on intermittent fasting, or an intermittently fast video on time-restricted feeding. I haven't really, I don't know, it's one of those things. In any case, I know that a lot of people are interested in this time-restricted feeding, intermittent fasting phenomenon, and so, man, I cannot get myself in the center. Is this it? Am I centered? I'm centered. Wait, that's the wrong. Never mind. Okay, so I like science stuff, and so I'd considered, like, when I was going to go over this intermittent fasting, time restricted feeding thing, I'm talking about like adaptations and physiology and biochemistry and all this other neat stuff, and I realized, like, shoot, I think I'm just going to list off the reasons why I like it in terms of a practice and things that are practically relevant to you. I hope that's okay. We can talk about the sciencey, super sciencey stuff later, but I took some notes for myself and I realized that, like, man, if I were to tell people 10 things that I like about intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding, I actually like time restricted feeding, but that's the nerd in me. What the sort of things that you can expect out of it, and or why I like it, essentially. Okay, so the first, and again, these are not in any particular order, but I will tell you that the last one is my favorite. How about them apples? Okay, so the first thing I want to mention is that while you're in a fat loss phase, your calories are lower. Imagine that. Now, what ends up happening is that a lot of people love to eat like 8 meals of rabbit food, and that, like, really sucks. And so what I want to tell you is that it's okay to have fewer mondo meals because it sticks to your ribs, okay? I'd rather not have 9 salads. I think I would rather have like a few like mondo meals that stuck with me than having to deal with tuna and twigs all day. So that's reason number 1. And the next thing is that for a lot of people, eating earlier in the day makes them hungrier later in the day because of, metabolic fluctuations and circadian timing and internal clocks and all that fancy stuff. However, what I have found is that when people, including myself, you go without food in the morning, it feels much easier to, like, man, I could just go without food all day. But as soon as you have like a couple of morsels and you wake up, it's like, man, I'm ready to go, time to eat, like, every hour or whatever, like, that's how I am. And I figured out that if I go without food for the first few hours, I feel like I can go without food for the next few hours. But if I get a meal in immediately, then I want another meal in immediately. Okay? Now, on that note, going extended periods of time without eating, extended is relative, going extended periods of time without eating on a personal level, on a self-awareness, on a physiological level in your loins, I don't know, your heart, I don't know, some body part, you feel it. You're able to differentiate physiological hunger, like my body needs calories, versus psychological cravings, which is like, man, cookies and pizza sound great right now. And some of you may know a man who would call that the dessert stomach, or grandma. Okay, everybody has room in the dessert stomach, and that's the craving part, okay? Oh, that being said, moving on with that in mind, what you can do is that with this sort of method, you can concentrate all of your food or most of your food later in the day, especially at night when cravings are highest. So a lot of people, when you got the tuna and twig diet going on later at night, you're like, man, I could really use that. At that point, like, it doesn't even matter what sort of food you eat. You're like, I could eat more tuna and twigs. But even then, if it's not on the plan, going to bed hungry sucks. So if you can go without a little bit earlier, you can have a little bit more later and go to bed with a full stomach. And that makes a lot of people feel better, including myself, okay? Next, I think getting a little bit more into the fancy stuff, like little sciencier things, is that something that is worth noting is that your morning caffeine kick, if you choose to have one, is going to kick harder, okay? And this goes with any sort of pharmacy and supplementation that you decide to go with in the morning, because you don't have any food to slow the uptake of whatever you consume. Okay, this means you have higher peak levels, everything gets absorbed faster. If you have sensitive tummies, and maybe reconsider this, always asterisk, but generally speaking, stuff hits you harder and faster on an empty stomach, and I'm sure some people from their college days understand that. Now, a little bit further into the science here, I'm going to notice that I was going to talk about this, but I think it's cool, is that you have what's called increased metabolic flexibility, okay? Especially when combined with training. Now, boiled down, this means that you can train your body through training and time-restricted feeding or intermittent fasting to be more efficient at burning fat instead of carbohydrate, especially at rest. And as cool as it sounds, it's also very good for you to burn more fat when you're doing nothing. You're definitely healthier that way, but it also translates into a lot of other aspects of your health and body composition as well. So that is actually a legit benefit. And after being adapted to time-restricted feeding, after you go a few days, maybe a week, with the shifted meal schedule patterns, you'll notice that your productivity in the morning goes way up, okay? The morning is when most people are productive anyway, or the only time they have to be productive. And so what happens is during these periods of fasting, your body, after a few days, a week or so, it'll start kicking up its own output of its natural ADHD med called epinephrine. So what you'll find is that after long periods of fasting, you kind of feel high sometimes, like, man, I feel great. That's because your body's taking care of itself. And so what you can do is you can engineer that sort of response to make it so that the first half of your day, when you should be the most productive anyway, you can get a lot more productivity out of it, which I think is a great benefit that is not really mentioned that often. And last, certainly not least, definitely my favorite, is that this is a sustainable method that if you choose to, you can do it forever. And like Scout's honor. I don't know. That's definitely the truth. This is something that you can do forever. It's not weird socially. I mean, practically speaking, it's like you just don't eat till lunch, depending on what sort of feeding pattern you have. Maybe late lunch. So you can incorporate this and it doesn't screw with your life. And you can reach your body composition goals and do it in a way that's not going to drive you crazy. And I hope you guys found that valuable. Have a wonderful day.